Hey everybody, it is Gordon Majak here, back with another episode of Timeless Pop, Rock, and Soul. And back on a Saturday afternoon, and you know what that means. It is time for another one of my patented, it's not really patented, one of my trademark, I didn't trademark it either. One of my famous, well, not really. One of my notorious triple play, Saturday triple play. That is where I play 3 songs in a row, 3 videos in a row, for 3 songs in a row by one of the most popular artists on the channel. And today we have the double blessing that not only is it one of the most popular artists here on the channel as determined by the number of views their songs get, but also one of my personal favorites too. Man, I am so deeply connected to this artist. I've been thinking about it all day today, and it is really a profound connection that I feel to this particular artist and their catalog. Now, we have done a couple previous videos for, obviously, for this artist. I think we did, what did we start with? Was Child of Vision from the Breakfast in America album. That was back there several months ago, a few months ago. And then we did Crime of the Century, I think the title track of their Crime of the Century album. Who else could I be talking about but these guys, the legends, the one and only Supertramp? And we are going to start with this album right here on our Saturday Triple Play. And we are going to hear a song called Sister Moonshine. And this is Supertramp's Crisis What Crisis album there from September of 1975. And if my memory serves, I think this is just a few months before I saw them in concert for the first time. Because when I saw them there in, I believe it was late 1975, they were still promoting Crime of the Century from the previous year into 1975. But I think this album had just come out because they played 5 or 6 songs from this album too, Crisis What Crisis. So they were really working Crime of the Century and this album. What a show, man. What a great first impression. That first Supertramp concert made on me. I was already a huge diehard fan anyway, just on the basis of Crime of the Century. But when they put this one back to back with that, yeah, quite a show. And they did perform this particular song that we're going to hear. Sister Moonshine did get to hear them perform this one live several times, actually, because I think Supertramp played this song live every time I saw them. And that would have been for the first time there in 75, and then 2 more times in 79 on the Breakfast in America tour, because I missed the tour in between there for Even in the Quietest Moments. But at any rate, we are going to hear Sister Moonshine from Supertramp, Crisis What Crisis. And man, I remember this album like it was yesterday. I played the hell out of this record, and then I had the tape for a while. I made myself this is way back there in the 70s, I made myself like a custom Supertramp compilation with my favorite stuff on it, man. And I played the hell out of this album. And what can I say about Supertramp, man? Such a great personal memory, as I related in one of the previous videos there, of getting to meet them in 1979 and making quite a connection with Roger Hodgson and getting to meet all the guys in the band on that Breakfast in America tour. Saw them in concert, as I said, 3 incredible, memorable shows from these guys. I love them and respect the hell out of them. And there is just a certain vibe, I was thinking today. There's a certain Supertramp vibration, a certain frequency. It's a mood. It's like a space that you can get in. I was thinking today, mental, emotional. It's got a spiritual element to it. But there is a certain Supertramp frequency that when for whatever reason, you are aligned with that particular frequency in your life or in your moods or in your day-to-day living, there's that certain Supertramp vibe that when you're in the mood for that and you dial up the Supertramp, holy cow, man. They're not an artist that I listen to often. I don't listen to them a lot in terms of a lot being often, but when I do get into that space where I have to hear some Supertramp, like I have been in there lately, and I could not wait to do it today. I knew we had to go to Supertramp today for 3 in a row. When you get into that space, man, they are a band that I can just keep right on going with for a while and just binge on, because all of those old classic albums, just such incredible records. And we are going to hear a song, Sister Moonshine. This was a Roger Hodgson composition. And of course, one of the great things, one of the many great things about Supertramp was that cool, dynamic balance between Rick Davies and Roger Hodgson. They're on the front line writing the songs and singing the songs and playing all of that off, balanced all of that so perfectly, so beautifully, with the back line of their rhythm section there. And that means the great Bob Siebenberg on drums, just one of the most powerful and most dynamic. I have seen so many great drummers live in concert over the course of my concert going years back there in the old days in the music biz. I saw so many great drummers, and I have to tell you, man, nobody as powerful and dynamic and punchy live in concert. What an incredible performer. The great Bob Siebenberg on drums. You got the great Dougie Thompson on bass, just carving out those super tight and concise, funky bass lines. And those guys, Dougie Thompson and Bob Siebenberg, always just locked together. Such an incredibly tight core, such an incredibly tight foundation on the bottom end for Supertramp. And then, of course, in between it all, balancing it all out, is the great John Helliwell on percussion and woodwinds and all of the horns. And he also plays some keyboards, and he does a little bit of background singing. And what a great stage presence as well for John Helliwell. He was always such a great performer, such a fun artist to watch do his thing live. And you put all of that together there, as I said, the back line of the band there, along with Roger Hodgson and Rick Davies out front on keyboards and guitar, respectively. And it is just an unbelievable sound for Supertramp. They captivated me, as I said there in one of the previous videos, right from the start, from the first times in my late 74, early 75 there, when I first heard Crime of the Century. And as I said, man, by the time we hit this album here, now this would have been, they say this is their 4th album, so that means they had 2 albums before I knew who they were. I thought they only had 1 before I knew who they were, indelibly stamped, but apparently they had 2 before I knew who they were. So I'm not exactly positive about the timeline here, because I know I came into the picture on Crime of the Century, and then this album knocked my socks off again, and they were 2 for 2 in my book, but it says that this was actually their 4th album. But what a great record it was. So cool to see them perform a number of these songs in concert there on that tour, the Crisis What Crisis tour in late 75. Just incredible concert memories of these guys, man. What a band, what a show they put on. And this was always one of my favorites. I thought this was a song there, 75? This was a song that sort of was pointing a little bit of the direction they were about to go, even more so. On the next album, on the Even in the Quietest Moments album, or at least for Roger Hodgson personally, because that was the album where, of course, he had the big hit with Give a Little Bit. And here's a song that sort of suggests that a song like Give a Little Bit may not be too far around the corner in the future. But I always loved this one. I just always thought this was such a uplifting and melodic and just fun song to sing along with. And of course, it just grooves like crazy. All of the Supertramp stuff does. You already know that. From 1975 and Crisis? What Crisis? Saturday Triple Play. We kick it off here in part 1 with Roger Hodgson and Supertramp. It is Sister Moonshine. Ah, God. What a record. What a sound. There you go. Dougie Thompson. So tasty. That bass line is just ridiculous. What a groove. Ah. The thing I love is how it sounds so totally Supertramp, and yet not at all like anything on Crime of the Century. It's just a totally fresh sound for this album, but it's just so perfect. Man, everybody in that band contributes so beautifully to that finished product of that Supertramp sound. It's a Roger Hodgson composition. He's out front singing it, of course, and playing guitars and stuff, but you can just feel the Rick Davies vibe there in certain interjections in that part. John Helliwell, of course, the drums and the bass just locked so beautifully, so smooth and so tight as always. You just can't ignore The great ensemble sound of Supertramp, man. And it's funny because I talked about that vibe, that Supertramp vibe. I have been in this certain space sort of recently here, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc. And it took me a while to find the musical correlation to it. I couldn't quite put it into a musical terms. I was sort of looking around trying to think, is it this artist that I'm vibing to? Is it that artist? What is this frequency that I'm trying to tune to, that I'm trying to find some music to reflect this? And it wasn't until yesterday and I don't even know how quite in a moment the magic of it happened. And I think maybe I just saw Supertramp's name as an artist on a list of artists here that I had in a certain playlist. And I think I just sort of saw Supertramp, and it was like in a moment, it kind of jolted me awake. And I went, oh my God, I'm in that Supertramp space. That's where I'm at. I have got to get to some Supertramp today. And God, these guys. And like I said there during the song, this is such a totally cool. It's weird how it's so fresh. Sister Moonshine sounds so new and so fresh for Supertramp there in 1975. Does not sound like anything on Crime of the Century. Doesn't sound like it would have even fit on Crime of the Century. And yet at the same time as I say that, Sister Moonshine's such a quintessentially Roger Hodgson Supertramp song. And so at the same time as it sounds so familiar and just so quintessentially them, at the same time, you have to say it would not have fit on Crime of the Century. It is a uniquely new, fresh sound for this album, and same for so much of this album. So many, and this is a great album. There's so many great songs on this album. There's at least a half a dozen just killer Supertramp songs on here. And so just such a great fresh sound for this album. And I always thought that this was sort of the big overlooked record in that classic lineup of Supertramp there in those years, from Crime of the Century in 74 and 75 to Crisis What Crisis in 75. Even in the Quietest Moments album was 1977, and then, of course, Breakfast in America in 1979. And I know they continued on after that, and they had Famous Last Words, and they did other stuff. But I'm just saying, if we really take it's those four albums, from Crime of the Century in 74 to Breakfast in America, it's a 5-year span. I've always thought that this was sort of the overlooked gem of the Supertramp catalog. And I mean, all of their stuff is just so good. What an incredible catalog. And that is the vibe I have been feeling, and I couldn't wait to lock into these songs. I had these songs queued up on a playlist. I was going to play some of these a month ago, and today I just came around to that mood, and I finally was able to identify what the frequency was. And I knew we were going to have to do some Supertramp. That is part one, Roger Hodgson and Supertramp, Sister Moonshine from the Crisis What Crisis record. Part two, we are going to jump up to 1977, Even in the Quietest Moments, another killer Supertramp record. Let's see what I'm going to come up with next. See you in that next video. Bum, bop, bop. God, their stuff is just so cool. I could just sit here and play Supertramp all damn day. Might do it. Don't tempt me. See you in the next one.